Alright, so for this micro teach, I'm going to be talking about modules, I believe it's 63, the anxiety, anxiety stressor, and personality psychological disorder. Now, first off, your book warns you about something called medical student's disease, and that's where you read about psychological disorder and you suddenly realize, hey, I think I have some of this. I think I have this disorder. Let me reassure you right now, you do not suffer from any sort of psychological disorder unless you've already been diagnosed. If you continue on to further psychology classes, you'll eventually take abnormal psychology, where you'll learn about a lot of different other psychological disorders, and you're bound to find one that sort of sounds like you. But in order to have a psychological disorder, it's got to be far more intrusive on your life than you're thinking. Everyone sort of has symptoms of psychological disorders, but as long as they don't truly interfere with your life, it's normal behavior. So I'm going to give an example. I know this one girl, we're going to call her Helen. And Helen has been a good friend of mine for years. I know her really well. She's practically my sister. Now, Helen's a vet tech, which is basically a vet nurse, and she loves her job. She'll go in, she treats the dogs, holds them for the vet, comes with all that stuff. She loves her job. But during one time in her career, it was getting really stressful because there was another vet tech who was the head vet tech, and from the story she told me, this vet tech, we're going to call her Betty. Betty was really bossy and not really a team player, and she liked to whine about her own problems and sort of pin them on someone else. So, Helen would often come home and she'd come visit me and she'd be really upset and tell me about, oh, Betty's doing this, Betty complains to the doctor about me again, Betty told me to go sweep the back floor while she stood around and didn't do anything. So Helen sort of got a little stressed at work, and you could tell when she came home. But after a while she'd sit around, we'd talk, and she'd start to calm down. She'd been removed from the stressful situation, she's fine with it. Well, Helen, she wasn't a hypochondriac, but she did have we'll call them hypochondriac tendencies. She sort of worried about her health a little bit. Not to the point where she'd avoid doing anything, but whenever something felt off inside, she'd say, my stomach's been feeling really weird for a while. I don't know what's going on. I think something's wrong. Kind of those tendencies, and, it was never really bad. She wasn't going to the doctor all the time. It was just every once in a while. But one thing she also had was a horrible fear of rabies. It wasn't a phobia, because if it was a phobia, she wouldn't have been able to go to her work, because that's a place where rabies could be. Well, anyway, one day she goes to work, and this dog comes in, and she treats it like all the other dogs. And, nothing comes of it, except they had to put this dog down because, it was sick. Well, the next day, this call came in from the animal shelter. They were the ones who took the dog after it put it down. And it turns out that the dog had tested positive for rabies. Now, the day before, Helen had been told this dog maybe had distemper, and, she was kind of worried about it. It's like, oh, distemper, that's really bad, but, if it's just distemper, it's all right. And then Helen heard the dog was positive for rabies, and she freaked out. She started thinking, wait, I touched that dog. Did I touch that dog? Did I get any of his saliva on me? Did I get any in me? She just kept obsessing over whether or not she had rabies, to the point where she stopped walking. She would lean against tables. She was hyperventilating, and her coworkers noticed, and they thought, Helen, what's the matter? What's wrong? And Helen was just freaking out. So they're like, okay, Helen, we're going to take you down to the care center real quick. So they took her to the care center. She started complaining. It's like, I think I'm having a heart attack. My heart's pumping. I can't breathe. I have this horrible pain in my stomach. I don't know what's wrong. And she freaked out. And the doctor checked her. Nothing was wrong. And they realized she's having a panic attack. Well, afterwards they sent her home. She's still kind of worried, and she kept worrying the next day, and she called me and told me, and she was worried about it. She's like, I don't know if I have rabies. What if I have rabies? And it continued on, and then she went back to work the next day, and the behavior continued. She kept getting freaked out and worried, and she'd hyperventilate, and she had the horrible pain in her stomach. And eventually it got so bad, they actually sent her to a psychiatrist who diagnosed her with anxiety disorder. Now, the funny thing about Helen was, in typical anxiety disorders, you try to avoid avoid what triggered it. So I suggested to her, not being a psychologist, just from what I knew, I said, I think you need some time off of work, because my thought was, well, you went to work and that triggered it. And if you keep pulling back, you're going to keep getting triggered. But she also had a slight worry about, well, if I'm not there, they don't have enough people to staff. And I had to be there. The anxiety moved not just from her fear of the rabies, but also to a fear of letting her coworkers down. The anxiety was essentially running her life and taking these two different ways of doing it. She couldn't stay away from work where she should have been staying away to calm down because she was too worried about her coworkers needing her or something big coming in. So she ended up being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And that's the thing about psychological disorders, is they're behaviors that eventually run your life. Helen sort of became run by anxiety until she got treatment for it. So, moving on from anxiety, there's another one in your book known as OCD. And you've probably heard of OCD, and you probably think you know someone with OCD. OCD people are the Monica Gellers of the world. Everything's got to be perfectly clean and perfectly in place. The picture frames can't be a millimeter off where they can tell, and it will drive them insane. Or they'll walk through a store and see that one tile out of place, and no, that just drives them crazy all day. Well, that's not exactly obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessive compulsive disorder is basically intrusive thoughts and behaviors that have a heavier impact on your life. Sure, you may be one of those clean freaks who have to clean, but just because you have OCD doesn't mean you like to clean. People with OCD don't always clean, and they don't really like to clean. The reason some do is because it alleviates the feeling of stress, such as, for some reason, they'll believe that if everything isn't just so, something horrible is going to happen. Something really bad is going to happen to them, even though there's no evidence of this. This is a delusion. Nothing's going to happen. But to them, yes, the end of the world's going to happen if there's germs here, or if I don't do this, if I don't click the light switch several times just to make sure it's going to explode or something. One actual common form of OCD is intrusive thoughts. An example of this would be, say you had a baby brother or sister, and they're sleeping in their crib in your mom and dad's room. And then in the middle of the night, you get the intrusive thought where you think, my baby brother or sister is going to die. So you get up and you go check on him. And once you get in there and you check, it's like, oh, okay, she's all right. So back you go into your room. Except the intrusive thought hasn't left. My baby brother or sister is going to die. You get up and go check again, half a second later. All right, still there. And this cycle will keep repeating because the thought hasn't left. The intrusive thought compels your behavior to do this over and over again. That's why sometimes people with OCD click a light switch on and off, because the thought is there and it's compelling them to do so. It's not that they want to do it or that it even relieves the anxiety. It's trying to, but it doesn't always work. So OCD is not just about being clean. It's about dealing with these thoughts that get in your head. I once saw on a talk show this woman who it was sort of a religious OCD. She was afraid of committing a sin to the point where she couldn't change a baby because she believed if she touched the baby's bottom, that instantly made her a pedophile. And whenever she had these thoughts, she'd take a step back and she would say prayers or Hail Marys over and over again. And that's the thing about these behaviors. They'll repeat them sometimes to the point where someone has to make them stop. Some people with OCD who wash their hands over and over do it to the point where their hands are constantly dried out and they will bleed, and they still won't stop because the compulsion is still there. They can't stop. Doing this is supposed to relieve the anxiety. All right, and the final disorder I'm going to talk about is antisocial personality disorder. Now again, you probably think you know someone who's antisocial, just, the shut-in. They don't want to go out. They don't want to deal with people. They say they hate people. And that's not exactly what antisocial personality disorder is. That's actually closer to something called asocial personality disorder. This is marked by people who are mostly too shy to go out. They sort of think everyone's judging them. So they won't go outside because I don't want to deal with people who I think they're looking at me and I think they're judging every little thing I do. Antisocial personality disorder is basically the people with this don't have a moral compass. They are they don't see how their actions are bad, or they can't really think of things from another person's point of view. They don't really care about the people. They don't understand why some of the behavior they do is considered wrong. Like, say someone's standing in their way and they shove them out of the way. They understand what they did is wrong. They were just moving someone out of the way. So why are they in trouble? You'll probably hear most serial killers have this. And serial killers, the thing about them is, most of the reason they aren't caught is because people with antisocial personality disorder have figured out the rules. They know how to pretend to be normal so that no one bothers them. Not because they know what they're doing is wrong, but because they don't want to be locked up or get in trouble. I mean, they know they'll get in trouble and they worry about getting in trouble, but not because they did something bad, just because people want them to stop. Or, what's a good way to put this? When they do something wrong, they want to cover it up because they know they'll get in trouble, but not because they understand what they did is wrong. Alright, so that's all I'm going to be talking about for this week. Don't forget your assignments are due Wednesday, and so is your quiz, and I will see y'all in class.